نعم, you can start reading now.
Okay. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. Nabina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una. Wanfa'na bima allamtana. Wazidna ilma. Rabbi zidni ilma. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي أما بعد فقال البيكوني رحمه الله تعالى وذو آه، وذو اختلاف سند أو مثني مضطرب عند أهيل الفني.
نعم, الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له, وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, فقد قال الإمام البيقوني رحمه الله تعالى: وذو اختلاف سند أو متن مضطرب عند أهيل الفن. نعم.
وقال Shaykh ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala, this is the 25th category of the classifications of hadith mentioned in the poem, which is Al-Muttarib, the narration with ikhtilaf in its sanad or isnad or matan. The word iztirab, state of being muttarib, means difference, yani ikhtilaf linguistically. As for Al-Muttarib in Mustalah al-Hadith, it is one of that the narrators differ regarding its sanad or matan in such a way that it is neither possible to combine them jam'a nor outweighing one over the other.
نعم.
uh,
So
tarjih.
الاضطراب, the Sheikh said what? Underline this. He said that they are different in a way that we cannot make jam' or tarjih. We cannot make jam' or tarjih. So jam' is what? Jam' is when we put the meanings of the hadith together. For example, we get two hadiths, we look at them, we say, oh, this might be contradicting. But then we look at, for example, what the ulama said, and no, they go along. This is called al-jam'. So they're not really contradicting. But what about tarjih? Tarjih is if we want to overweigh one over the other. We say, no, this is nasikh, for example, this is mansukh. Or we say, no, this is, you understand? So when none of this we are able to do, then this is the muttarib. Na'am.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. As for the difference in the sanad, its example would be that some of the narrators narrated the hadith as muttasil, whilst other narrated it as munqati'. And as for the difference in the matan, its example would be that some of them narrated it as marfu', while others narrated it as mawquf, or they narrated it in a different manner without doing tarjih or jama'. As such, if combination jama' is possible, then there is no iztirab. And if outweighing tarjih is possible, then we take the correct opinion, and thus there is no iztirab. And if the difference is not based on the original meaning, then there is no iztirab in this case as well. An example of where combination is possible is the hadith of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's Hajj, as the narrators differ in a number of ways. Some of them said that he performed the Hajj in the manner of Quran, and some said that he performed it in the manner of Ifrad, while others said that he performed it in the manner of Tamattu. In the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, we traveled with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the year of the Fairul Hajj, Hajj al-Wada. Some of us performed the tahallul with a Hajj, while some with an Umrah, and some with a Hajj and an Umrah. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed the tahallul with the Hajj. Whereas in the hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, and other companions, he performed the Hajj as tamattu. And in some of the ahadith, uh, one sec. And in some of the ahadith, he performed it as Kiran. As such, if we look at this difference in the beginning, uh, we would say that the hadith is muttarib, and as we rule it as iztirab, then the pilgrimage of the Prophet ﷺ remains as an unsolved problem.
Yeah, it will
Thus, we
be
do not know.
problematic. This is all straightforward. It does not need any explanation now.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. Thus, we do not know if the Prophet ﷺ performed it as tamattu, kiran, or ifrad. However, if the contemplation we see that combination is possible to expel the ittirab, there are two ways to combine these narrations. The first perspective is that those who
Combine,
narrated that
combine meaning we make them go along. So instead of contradicting one another, they go along. Because we might understand something to be contradicting something else. And it is, in reality, it's not really a contradiction. We are the ones who are thinking that it is a contradiction. So when we contemplate, when we bring the ahadith, when we give it a deeper look, we understand that there is no contradiction. Naam.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. The first perspective is that those who narrated that uh, he performed the Ifrad pilgrimage refer to the state of Ifrad of the rites. That is, he did not go beyond the rights of the one performing the Ifrad pilgrimage. And the Ifrad rights are such that upon arriving in Makkah, one would perform the Tawaf al-Qudum, followed by the Sa'i for Hajj. On the day of Eid, one performs only the Tawaf of Ifada and not the Sa'i. And when one intends to leave Makkah, he performs the Tawaf al-Wada and then leaves. Um while those who narrated that he performed the tamattu form of Hajj referred to him coupling the Umrah and Hajj in one journey, thus enjoying, I guess it's enjoining. It
And
says enjoying here.
enjoining meaning to command that which is good or to command something. Now,
Yani it's in the translation it's enjoying Yashak. So it might be a mistake. Uh, Thus enjoining the pilgrimage of abandoning
no,
one
no,
of
it's
the
enjoying, enjoying.
enjoying.
Yeah,
Okay,
because the
okay.
tamattu
Barakallah.
is يعني tamattu is that he is يعني he gets the chance to make tamattu, enjoy the umrah. Now,
Okay, Barakallah Fik. Enjoying the privilege of abandoning uh, one of the two journeys. And those who narrated that he performed Quran by integrating the Hajj and Umrah, then this is the actual case. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, there is
you
no
see what
doubt
the
that the
Sheikh
Prophet
said. Bin Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, this Imam, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him, said, فَتَمَتَّعَ بِسُقُوطِ أَحَدِ السَّفَرَيْنِ. So he enjoyed not having to travel twice, once for Umrah, once for Hajj. This is what is meant by enjoying. Now,
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said, there is no doubt that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed Quran, whereas the tamattu is more preferred to me. The second perspective is that he entered the state of ihram from Hajj initially and then inserted the Umrah in it. Uh, Thus, he entered into the state of ifrad in terms of his initial ihram and the state of Quran in the second case. However, this is not correct according to the fundamentals of Imam Ahmad's madhab. This is because one of his usul is that it is not permissible to insert the Umrah into the Hajj, and indeed it is permissible only to do the opposite. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah
no,
rahimahullah said,
not indeed. وَإِنَّمَا الَّذِي يَصُحُّ هُوَ الْعَكْسُ. And what is only correct is the opposite. So not indeed. The translation of إنما is not indeed. إنما أداة حصر. So the meaning is exclusivity. So when you translate, you say only. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, whilst confirming the first perspective, whoever narrated that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed the Ifrat pilgrimage refers to his performance of the rites of the Hajj. And whoever said that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed the Tamattu pilgrimage, then he refers to the fact that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with an Umrah and a Hajj in one journey and thus enjoyed the pilgrimage of abandoning one of the two journeys upon it. This is due to the fact that if he were to perform the Umrah and Hajj, then he would have performed the Umrah on one journey and the Hajj in another. Thus, the state of Tamattu was due to his abandonment of one of the two journeys, as he only set out once and combined the Umrah and Hajj, and as such, he enjoyed the privilege. As for whoever states that he was in the state of Kiran, then this is uh, uh, then this is the reality. He was in the state of Kiran because there is no doubt that the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not exit the state of Ihram from Umrah. In fact, he excuse me about that. Just a minute.
So he did not
Just a
exit.
minute.
No. So he did not exit his ihram. In fact, he stayed in his ihram because he has saqa al-hadi, has uh, uh, put forth his animal sacrifice. ثم نرجع إلى الحج فنقول الآن ساعته ثلاثة. Then we go back to Hajj and we say that the nusuk of Hajj are three types. Number one, ifrad. Number two, التمتع.
I'm done.
Number three, القران. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu alaikum. So as for al-ifrad, it is such that a person enters the state of ihram for Hajj on its own from the miqat and says labbaik Allahumma labbaik Allahumma hajja,
and only one. لبيك
followed
اللهم
by
حجا. نعم.
yeah, followed by performing the tawaf al-qudum and the sa'i for Hajj upon arrival in Makkah. He shall remain in the state of ihram until he completes his Hajj. On the day of Eid, he shall perform the tawaf al-ifada. Upon leaving, he performs the tawaf al-wada. And as for Kiran, it is such that a person enters the state of Ihram for Umrah and Hajj combined at the Miqat and says, Labbaik Allahumma Umratan wa Hajja. When he arrives in Makkah, he performs the Tawaf al Qudum and the Sa'i for Umrah and Hajj. Then he shall remain in the state of Ihram. On the day of Eid, he shall perform the Tawaf al Ifada, and upon leaving, he shall perform the Tawaf al Wada. Thus, his rites are similar to that of al Ifrad, but the intention is different. As for Tamattu, it is such that a person enters the state of Ihram for Umrah from the Miqat. Then, when he arrives at Makkah, he shall perform the tawaf, the sa'i, and shorten his hair as he is performing Umrah. As such, he shall exit from the state of Ihram completely and may wear his clothes. Then on the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah, he shall enter the state of Ihram for Hajj, and on the on the day of Eid, he shall perform the tawaf al-ifada and the sa'i for Hajj, and upon leaving, he shall perform the tawaf al-wada. If the
So all of
combination
this,
of the
so all of this has nothing to do with مصطلح الحديث. So this is استطراد by the Sheikh. He's a sea of knowledge. So he's going into fiqh and so on and so forth and explaining fiqh matters. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu alaikum. If the combination of the narrations is not possible, we shall work upon outweighing one of the narrations and then take the most correct opinion and abandon the mutharib. In example would its example would be the hadith of Barira radiallahu anha when she was freed from slavery by Aisha radiallahu anha. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave her the choice to remain with her husband or to annul the marriage from him. Um, in some of the narrations, it was stated
annul,
that her
annul meaning annulment. تفسخ العقد. To annul
husband,
the contract of marriage. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu alaikum. In some of the narrations, it was mentioned that her husband Mughith was as a free man, and in some he was said to be a slave. Thus, there is a discrepancy in the hadith, though the hadith is one combination al jama is not possible. Thus, we work upon outweighing one of the narrations tarjih, and the correct opinion is that he was a slave. If this is the correct opinion, then we shall abandon the incorrect opinion and take the correct one. And this correct opinion shall be free from idtirab because it is the rajih, correct opinion. And if there is no discrepancy in the original meaning, that is the root of the meaning or asal al ma'na, then there is no idtirab and it is seen as a secondary matter. Example, the narrators differ regarding the price of the camel belonging to Jabir radiallahu an, and the narrators in the hadith of Fudala ibn Ubaid differ regarding the price of the necklace containing gold and pearls, whether he purchased it with 12 dinars or more or less than that. Thus, we say that this difference has no impact because it does not go back to the original meaning of the hadith, which is the selling of gold with gold, as all of them agreed upon the fact that the necklace had gold and pearls and was sold with gold coins. The difference is merely regarding that the amount of gold coins that it was sold for. The narrators differed upon it, but it was it there is but this is a difference that has no effect. Similarly, in the hadith of Jabir radiallahu anh, where the narrators agreed upon the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam bought his camel and that Jabir laid the condition that he would ride it to Medina, but they differed upon its price. First, we say that this difference has no effect because it does not go back to the original meaning of the hadith, which the subject of the hadith revolves around. The ruling of the Muttarib narration is that it is daif because because the discrepancy of the narrators shows that they were not precise in their narration in its narration, and it is known that if there is no precision in the hadith, then it is one of the divisions of daif narrations.
No, مضطرب is ضعيف. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu alaikum. The author's phrase muztarib, according to the people of the art, in the Arabic, the wording muztarib, in the Uhail al Fan, it may be asked, why is the word ahl in the tasghir tasghir form, and should one diminish the people of knowledge? We say that the author was in need of the tasghir form due to the structuring of the poem. As such, the tasghir is considered only as a means of completing the line. If not, he would have said to the ahl, people of the art, in the ahl al fan. And if someone were to say art, Alfan is known to be not praiseworthy to us, we say that the scholars refer to Alfan as the category of knowledge. A poet once said, "You wish to become a scholar of fiqh with views overnight, without any pain, while madness has different arts." Meaning that the one who wishes to be a scholar of fiqh, able to give opinions on issues overnight without enduring the required fatigue, he is considered to be a majnoon, uh, and the madness has different types, one of which is if someone were to say, I want to be a scholar of fiqh with deep insight whilst I sleep on my mattress, Allah Mustaan. uh,
So the
now,
Sheikh is commenting on something because he said عند أهيل الفن. He did not say عند أهل الفن. Why did he say أهيل الفن؟ نعم.
sorry.
نعم. You can mute بارك الله. So why did he say أهيل الفن and he did not say أهل الفن? So this is because of the poetry itself, because I don't think this is existent in the English language, but it exists in Arabic and other languages as well. For example, German. So you can add something to the word, like line in German or schön in German. That would mean that it is a smaller version. So if I remember correctly, you have tela, which is a plate. You say tela line. Tela line meaning what? Meaning that the plate is a smaller plate. Something like that. In other languages, this is available, and also in Arabic. So ahl meaning the people of. So when you say uhail, this is tasghir, as if you are saying little people of, but that's not what is meant. He only used that for the meter of the poem or the poetry that's being used. Now, and then المؤلف said, قال المؤلف والمدرجات في الحديث ما أتت من بعض ألفاظ الرواة اتصلت. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. Insertions in the hadith are what came from some of the words of the narrators that were connected. Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah says, this is the 26th category of the classification of hadith mentioned in the poem, which is al-mudraj, the insertion. The hadith, which is mudraj, is when one of the narrators inserted something into the hadith without distinguishing it. Due to this, it is termed as al-mudraj. because it was inserted into the hadith without differentiating the narration from the insertion. Allahul Musta'an.
You can, if you have a important phone call,
Uh,
we can have
Subhanallah,
another reading.
no, Sheikh. It's
No.
just like, I just
So,
keep getting calls.
so go
Let me
ahead.
mute it.
No, no, no,
Tayyib, just a minute, Sheikh. Yeah, I'm done.
no, no.
So, the hadith, which is mudraj, is where one of the narrators inserted something into the hadith without distinguishing it. Due to this, it is termed as mudraj because it was inserted into the hadith without differentiating the narration from the insertion. Thus, the mudraj is not from the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but from the speech of the narrators.
No.
So sometimes,
So,
yeah.
as the Shaykh said, so it is not the speech of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is what the narrator is saying, and he did not differentiate between what he's saying and what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. This is called mudraj. No.
Ahsan Allahu ilaykum. Sometimes the narrator brings it either to explain a word in the hadith or for other reasons. The mudraj sometimes occurs in the beginning of the hadith or sometimes in the middle of it and sometimes at the end. An example of the occurrence in the middle of the hadith of Abu Huraira
The big,
radiallahu an, where
the beginning of
uh,
the hadith.
yes, where he said, perform the ablution thoroughly, woe to the heels from the hellfire. The marfo is his saying, woe to the heels from the hellfire. As for his saying, perform the ablution thoroughly, it is from the speech of Abu Huraira
No.
radiallahu an,
إذا
and
the hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what? Said وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. Only. He said doom, woe, and doom and torment is for what? For the back of the للأعقاب, the back of the feet, من النار. But in the beginning, there is أسبغ الوضوء. So make the wudu be thoroughly. This is not, the Messenger ﷺ did not say that. This is Abu Huraira saying that. So this is called mudraj. Mudraj. So أسبغ الوضوء is mudraj. And the hadith is ويل للأعقاب من النار. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu ilaykum. It is from the speech of Abu Huraira radiallahu an, and the one who reads this hadith may think that all are from the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because it was not made clear as much. As for the example of Idraj, in the middle of the hadith, the narration of Az-Zuhri on the authority of Aisha radiallahu
الزهري
anha.
is Muhammad
Az-Zuhri.
ibn Shihab. محمد ابن شهاب الزهري. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu ilaykum. The authority of Aisha radiallahu anha regarding the ways of the revelation, that is what was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the beginning of his prophethood. She said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to go in the state of al-Hind to the cave of Hira for a number of nights, and the state of Al-Hind is a form of worship to the end of the hadith. Uh, the one
نعم.
who hears the hadith,
So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to يتحنث. يتحنث. What is يتحنث? So at the end of the hadith, Az-Zuhri said, والتحنث, this word, تحنث, التعبد. The meaning of التحنث is worshipping. Worshipping. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu ilaykum. The one who hears this hadith may think that the explanation is from Aisha radiallahu anha speech, and the state of al-Hind is a form of worship. However, the explanation is actually from Az-Zuhri, and it is now mudraj, an addition in the hadith without clarification from him that it has been inserted. And this type of idraj is intended to be an explanation, and the explanation here is a must because al-Hind is originally considered to be a sin, as it was mentioned in the ayah, and they used to persist in al-Hind, al-Azim, the great violation, that is shirk. And if the meaning of al-Hind is not made clear, then it could be confused with the wrongdoing. However, the Prophet ﷺ was performing an act of worship, and worship is the remover of al-hinth, which is the wrongdoing. This is from the manner of naming something with its opposite.
And this is common in the Arabic language. This is common in the Arabic language. Sometimes they name things that are the opposite of them in order, as being optimistic, as being optimistic. And I forgot, I cannot remember an example for this, but it is common in the Arabic language. They call something by the opposite of it. نعم نعم. For example, they say هذا الإنسان فيه طب. This person has طب, meaning what? Meaning that he has he's been under the influence of sihr or ailment. So they did not call it as sorcery or ailment. They said طب, like medicine or healing. So they called it by the opposite, as a source of optimism. This is an Arabic way of using. This is the Arabic language. That's what the Arabs did. And from the fiqh of the Shaykh, he brought a hadith which has not the Messenger ﷺ speaking, but our mother Aisha. And then Az-Zuhri is the one who has inserted words or said something that is not from the words of our mother Aisha. So it's not exclusive to the Messenger ﷺ. So that pay attention to this. Naam.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. And an example of idraj at the end of the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, in which he narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, verily on the day of resurrection, my followers will be called al-ghur al-muhajjalun, muhajjalun, from the trace of ablution. So whoever amongst you who can extend the area of his ghur, the whiteness of his forehead, and tahjil, the whiteness of his limbs, should do so. As such, if you were to read this hadith, you would think that,
as some of the mashayikh, they say, if you start getting tired, then you use the siwak. If you are in majlis ilm and you start getting tired, or you start getting and you falling asleep or getting tired and so on and so forth, you do what? You use it. You use the siwak as it energizes you. Now,
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. So you would think that this is from the speech of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, the last sentence, so whoever amongst you who can extend the area of al-ghur and al-tahjil, tahjil should do so, is actually not from the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, it is mudraj from the speech of Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, whereas the part from the Prophet's speech is verily on the day of resurrection, my followers will be called as al-ghur al-muhajjalun, from the trace of ablution. As for the last sentence, Abu Huraira inserted it due to his understanding of the hadith. Due to this, Ibn al-Qayyim said in his Nuniyah, and Abu Huraira said this is from his understanding. So tomorrow the people of knowledge shall differentiate it. The insertion is identified through a number of ways. The first method is text al-nas, whereby it comes from another root, and this makes it clear that it is mudraj. The impossibility that the statement is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second method is the impossibility that the statement is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this occurs due to an apparent mistake in it or another presumption.
Know idraj, number one, by a nas.
Yes.
So there is another route where it is obvious that it is not said by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number two is when it's impossible for the Messenger to have said it, because there is a mistake in it, or there is evidence that shows us that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not say it, and cannot be from the sayings of the Messenger salawatu rabbi wa salamuhu alayhi. Naam.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. The third method is the text of one of the leading huffaz that defines in it that this is mudraj. What is the ruling of idraj? We say that if the meaning changes due to the idraj, then it is not permissible but to explain it. And if the meaning does not change, such as the hadith of Az-Zuhri, and the state of al-hinth is an act of worship, then there is nothing wrong with it. This is because it does not oppose the hadith which is marfu, and if it does not contradict it, then there is no objection for it to be mentioned as a form of explanation and clarification. And when the idraj is made clear, then it is not considered as an as an evidence hujjah. This is because it is not from the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, and thus it is not taken as an argument. The author's phrase, from some of the words of the narrators that were connected, the word connected is jumla haliya, circumstantial sentence, and the fa'il of the verb came. So the meaning is whatever came to be connected in the hadith without identification of it being distinct. Now, so the first two, the other two lines are done, Sheikh. So do I move forward? Any like
نعم continue.
yeah, sure. Barakallahu fik.
وقال رحمه الله تعالى وما روى كل قرين عن أخيه مدبج فاعرفه حقا وانتخيه. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. قال Imam Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala, this is the 27th category of the classification of the hadith mentioned in the poem, which is Al-Mudabbaj, narration from associates. And the author
المدبج, it comes from the dibaja of the face, meaning the side of the face. نعم.
The author defined it with his saying, and what was narrated by every Qareen from his associate. The Qareen peer is the peer, I mean, is he who accompanied the one whom he narrated from, was close to him in terms of age, or narrating from the same sheikh.
نعم. So
If
this is
it
called
was
the
said,
qarin. The qarin is the peer. The peer who has taken from the same sheikh, or they are at the same age. نعم.
if it were Ahsanallahu alaikum, if it was said that so and so is the Qareen of so and so, that is, he is an associate of the other, either in terms of age or the narration from the same teacher whom both narrated from. An example of this is that the period when they studied together under the Sheikh was close, such as in the same year, etc. Thus, al-Aqran, the plural of Qareen, is when one of them narrates from the other. As such, the scholars of Hadith term this narration as the Riwayah al-Aqran. Due to this, you shall find in the books of narrators that they say, and this narration from so and so is Riwayah al-Aqran. That is, he is of the same age or narrated from the same Sheikh as him. If each one of them narrated from the other, then it is called mudabbaj. An
نعم.
example would be
مدبج.
mudabbaj.
نعم. The sheikh will explain. The sheikh will explain. I wanted to say something, but I found it on the next page. نعم.
So an example would be that I narrated the hadith. Indeed, actions are according to the intentions from my friend, and he narrated the hadith. Allah does not accept the prayer of any one of you if he were to be in the state of impurity until he performs the ablution from me. Hence, this is the mudabbaj. Alternatively, if he were to narrate the same hadith that I narrated, and I narrated it from him through a route, while he narrated it from me through another route. Thus, this is also called as mudabbaj.
يعني what does
What
this
is it?
mean? What does this mean? Me and what's your name, أخي? أبو عبد الرحمن. Your kunya?
Izhar.
إزهار. Not Abu Abd al-Rahman.
Yes, Sheikh.
Because somebody on WhatsApp, somebody said
That is me.
that's
That
also
is me,
you.
Sheikh.
طيب okay, Abu Abd al-Rahman. طيب. So Abu Izhar. طيب. He doesn't want me to call him Abu Abd al-Rahman. طيب. Our
What are
brother.
you? What are you feeling?
طيب. Our brother Izhar. Our brother Izhar. 1 second, we have something in the chat. طيب. So our brother Izhar, I am narrating a hadith from Izhar, and he is narrating a hadith from me. This is called mudabbaj. That's all what the Shaykh is saying. نعم.
Ahsan
The
Allahu
last
alaykum.
example, I mean, not the first one, the last example. Because if I narrate a hadith from Izhar, this is mudabbaj, for example. If we are at the same age or taken from the same sheikh, narrating from the sheikh, I take from Izhar, this is mudabbaj. طيب, what if I take from him and he takes from me? This is mudabbaj as well. نعم.
Ahsan Allahu alaykum. What is the reason for calling this mudabaj? I guess
مدب
it's,
مدبج with a dal. مدبج.
yeah, yeah. It says muddabag. So like mudabbaj. Scholar said that it is taken from Vebaja al-Wajh, meaning Zanib al-Wajh, or the side of the face, as each one of
And
the
then what is the
peers.
dibaja of the wajh? What is the dibaja? It's the side of the face. So as if you are turning and telling him and him, you understand. So they took it from this. نعم.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. As each one of the peers turned to his associate in order for the other to narrate to him. Therefore, each one faces the other with his side of the face. Of course, this derivation is in the terms of mustalah. On the other hand, we may say that if every hadith between two narrators, where each one of them turned to the other in it, it is called mudabbaj. However, the scholars of the uh, terminologies of the hadith were more specific with it. So there is nothing wrong with the term. Thus, the mudabbaj narration is whereby each qareen narrated from the other, be it in one hadith or more. And the difference between these two, difference between the terminologies is that mudabbaj is whereby each one narrated from the other, whereas al-aqran is when only one of them narrated from the other. Now, so it is just give me a minute. Wama.
نعم.
The print is not clear in the PDF save. I'm looking for the Arabic. Uh, uh,
So the sheikh said something again. فمثلا أنا رويت عن قريني حديث إنما وهو روى عني حديث هذا يكون مدبجا. نعم. So I made a mistake. I made a mistake. Alhamdulillah that we actually read this. So I made a mistake a moment ago. So if I, again, let's give the example again. So if I am narrating hadith from Izhar, this is called hadith qareen. So I'm taking the hadith from, this is the hadith from the Aqran, this is hadith from qareen. But if we both narrate, so I narrate the hadith from him and he narrates the hadith from me, this is called mudabbaj. So this is what the Sheikh said رواية المدبج وهو أن يروي كل قرين عن قرينه إما حديثا واحدا أو أكثر. So each one narrates, so each one has to be both. This is called mudabbaj. And then the Sheikh said والفرق بينهما, and the difference between them, that mudabbaj meaning both of them narrate from one another. So me and Izhar, we narrate from one another. أما الأقران, as for Aqran, is only one person is making the tahdith without the other one mix. So let's give an example. We'll say Sheikh Samir, for example. So Sheikh Samir narrates from me, and I don't narrate from Sheikh Samir. So this is what? This is Aqran. And if I narrate, it becomes both ways. This is Mudabbaj. Now,
قال الإمام بيكوني رحمه
I will
الله
read it
تعالى.
inshallah. قال الإمام البيقوني رحمه الله تعالى متفق لفظا وخطا متفق وضده فيما ذكرنا المفترق. وضده فيما ذكرنا المفترق. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. So Imam Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah says these two are in the 28th category of the classifications of the hadith mentioned in the poem, which is al-muttafaq, identical names of narrators, and al-muftaraq,
No.
different personalities.
المتفق والمفترق. نعم.
All right. Ahsan Allah ilaykum. And these two are in actual fact considered as one category, which is contrary to the apparent appearance given by the statement of the author, where he divided them into two categories. This classification is related to the narrators, and it is about us finding two names that are identical in terms of pronunciation and writing, but there are different personalities. That is, two or more persons with one name. We acquire this knowledge so as to avoid confusion. For example, the word Abbas is the name of a narrator whose narration is acceptable, and it is also the name of another person whose narration is not acceptable. Thus, this is called as al-muttafaq, uh, al-muftarak. I mean, it's is it al-muttafiq or
متفق.
al-muftarik?
It is المتفق والمفترق. نعم.
Barakallahu fiqh. Uh, As such, if we look at Al-Hafid ibn Hajar, for example, he would say, Abbas told me, and this is one of his shiyukh who is trustworthy, and he would say, Abbas told me on another occasion, and this is also one of his teachers, but he is not trustworthy. Thus, the hadith comes as such, we do not know which one of the two Abbas he is referring to. Therefore, the soundness of the hadith remains doubtful to us. This is called al-muttafiq and al-muftariq according to the scholars. Uh, the reasoning for this nomenclature is apparent. That is the state of ittifaq, congruency in terms of pronunciations and writings, and the state of iftiraq, divergence in terms of the identified. Knowing that this is an important matter
Meaning,
because
meaning what? They are unified in the name itself. It's the same name, but not the same person. Not the same person. This is called al-muttafiq wal-muftariq, and it is one category, not more than one. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Knowing that this is an important matter because if both narrators differ in terms of trustworthiness, then the evaluation of the hadith is put to a halt until this is clarified. If each one of the two is trustworthy, and both have met the narrator before them, then there is no effect because the status of the hadith will remain as sahih. Therefore, the muttafiq and the muftariq are from the science regarding the narrators and not the text. Since it is related to the narrators, we have to look at the muttafiq and the muftariq. If each one of them is trustworthy, then there is no effect. And if one of them is trustworthy while the other is weak, then the evaluation of the hadith is put to a halt, and we do not rule the hadith as sahih or dhaif until the muttafiq and the muftariq are clarified to us. قال الإمام بيقوني رحمه الله تعالى
مؤتلف متفق الخط فقط وضده مختلف فاخشى الغلط. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. Shaykh ibn Uthaymin rahimullah said, this is the 29th category of the classification of the hadith mentioned in the poem, which is al-mu'talif, similar writing, and al-mukhtalif, different pronunciation. The mu'talif and the mukhtalif is one that is similar in terms of writing, but has different pronunciations such as Abbas and Ayyash, Khayad, and Habath, etc. That is
So we have Abbas, and it could be Ayyash, or we have Khayyat وحبات, and so on. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. That is the writing in terms of the word structure is one, but the difference is in the pronunciation. So it is called mu'talif and mukhtalif. It is called mu'talif due to the state of i'tilaf, conformity in terms of writing, and it is called mukhtalif due to its state of ikhtilaf, difference in terms of pronunciation. At the same time, it is also called muftariq due to the difference in the persons and selves. As such, the personalities are numerous in the muttafiq and the muftariq, as well as the mukhtalif and the mukhtalif. However, in the topic of names, if they are different, then they are classified as mu'talif and mukhtalif. Whereas if they are the same, they are classified as mu'talif, mu'tafiq and muftariq. This is the proper terminology, and there is no dispute in the terminology of the scholars of hadith because it is said that there is no argument in defining terminologies.
نعم. So متفق and مفترق and مؤتلف and مختلف. These are two categories. So you have متفق مفترق, this is one, and you have مؤتلف مختلف, that is two. And there is no, we cannot hold people, the ulama, to what they have made as terminologies for them. This is not something that we attack them for. We say, why do you make terminologies and so on and so forth? They can make the terminologies and agree upon what they see to be suitable. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. As such, what is the benefit of from knowing these categories from the classifications of the hadith? We say that the benefit is to avoid the arising of confusion amongst people. For example, if we have 10 narrators and all of them by the name of Abbas, so we have to know which Abbas was referred to, because one of them could be a weak narrator, either of two reasons. One is because of due to his weak memory, or due to his lack of righteousness, or other reasons. Thus, it is a must to know who this Abbas is in order to determine whether his narration is acceptable or not. Many scholars, amongst the leading from them is Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar, have written books and spoken about this matter. So, if someone were to ask, how do we differentiate from one another? We say, as for the Mu'talif and the Mukhtalif, the differentiation is easy because of the difference in the pronunciation, and there is no confusion in reality unless we follow the way of the predecessors in the absence of i'jam. And al-i'jam is the absence of dots.
الإعجام. الإعجام is not to put dots on the words. نعم.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. And al-i'jam is the absence of the dots from the Arabic letters. An example would be through the words Abbas and al-Ayyash, which were regarded as as one to the predecessors due to the absence of dots and vowels. As for the contemporary scholars, the confusion really rarely occurs in this matter as they practice i'jam of the words. As for Muttafiq and Muftariq, it is difficult even in the time of the contemporary scholars, because identifying the narrator whom was referred to requires in-depth research to specify the person in particular and his full description. Therefore, the benefit of learning this chapter is to identify the narrator in order to rule him as someone whose narration is acceptable or not. As such, the reference for this is the books that were written in this field, and amongst those that help in identifying the narrator is the knowledge of his teachers from whom he narrated, as well as his students who narrated from him.
And then البيقوني رحمه الله تعالى said, والفرد والمنكر الفرد ما راو به نعم والمنكر الفرد به راو غدا تعديله لا يحمل التفردا. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah says, this is the 30th category of the classification of the hadith mentioned in the poem, which is al-munkar, the rejected narration. The scholars differ in the definition of munkar. It is said that it is what was narrated by a weak narrator, which contradicted that of a reliable narrator. An example would be a hadith narrated by a reliable narrator in a certain way, whilst a weak one narrated it in another way, even though the two narrators were the students of the same sheikh. And some scholars defined the munkar as what was exclusive to one narrator, and there is no possibility of accepting it, even if he was the sole narrator. And this is how the author defined it. Upon the definition, the munkar is taken to be the gharib, which has no possibility of soundness due to the singularity of the sole narrator, and it is rejected even if it has other supported evidences of his type. And it does not move up to the grade of Al-Hasan. This is because the weakness in it has reached its peak. As for the first definition, it was the one adopted by Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar in his book Nukhbat al-Fikr.
نصبة الفكر. نصبة الفكر. It is a very known book, which he explained in another book called Nuzhat al-Nazar. طيب, so we have, the Sheikh has mentioned two definitions for al-munkar. One that Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar has gone with, the first one, with Ibn Hajar. So, if somebody who is da'if narrates the hadith in contradiction to that which is thiqa, trusted, then this is what Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar went to. And if the person who cannot be the only one, his level is not high enough to be the only one who narrates this hadith, this is munkar for our author here, Al-Bayquni. And then Al-Bayquni rahimahullah ta'ala said, متروك ما واحد به انفرد وأجمعوا لضعفه فهو يرد. نعم.
Al-Imam Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah says, this is the 31st category of the classification of the hadith mentioned in the poem, and it is mentioned and it is called as al-matruk, the abandoned sole narrator. Narration. The meaning of the author's words is that the matruk is what was exclusive to one narrator, and they agreed upon his weakness. The pronoun in they agreed upon refers to the scholars of the hadith, and his words, like the rejected, means it is being rejected, and the letter kaf is like an additional preposition in terms of emphasizing the meaning. Thus, the matruk, as defined by the author, is a narration by a weak narrator whom the scholars have agreed upon regarding his weakness. As such, the exception would be what was narrated by the one who was not regarded as weak. In this case, it is not termed as matruk. Likewise is the case for what was narrated by an individual whom the scholars differed in opinion with regarding his weakness.
نعم.
And this
So if the person who's narrating is not da'if, this is not matruk. And if there is disagreement on him, some say da'if, some say he's not da'if, this is not called matruk. نعم.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. And this is the definition that the author adopted. Some scholars said, amongst them is Ibn Hajar in his book Nukhba, and that the matruk is what was narrated by someone who was accused of lying.
Accused of lying, huh? Not a liar. He's accused of lying. But he has to be not accused of anybody. Anyone comes in and says, oh, he could be a liar. No, he's accused by the ulama of the fan itself, of the field itself, like Yahya ibn Ma'in, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. You understand? Barakallahu fikum. Naam.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. For example, if we found in the book of Al-Tahzib by Ibn Hajar that he said that the scholars agreed upon the weakness of one of the narrators, then we call his narration as matruk if he was the sole narrator, as the scholars agreed upon his weakness. And if we found in it that he said that the narrator was accused of lying, then we shall call it as matruk also, because the hadith of the one who is being accused of lying is considered to be like the mawdu' fabricated narration. We are not affirmative with the particular narration being fabricated, but the fact that he was accused of lying degrades his narration too close to the state of mawdu'.
Meaning very, extremely weak. طيب. ثم قال, which is the next verse? والكذب المختلق المصنوع على النبي فذلك الموضوع. نعم.
Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah says this is the 30th this is the 32nd category of the classification of hadith mentioned in the poem, which is al-mawdu'. The author has mentioned it with his statement and the lie which was fabricated until the end of the quote. That is, it is that which was created by some people and attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we call it as mawdu'. We call it mawdu' terminologically. And the word mawdu' placed, does it refer to the scholars placing it in their books and not paying attention to it, or the narrator attributed it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We say that in actual fact it encompasses both types. As such, the scholars reported it without giving any regard to its status. So it is mawdu' that the narrator attributed it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are many fabricated ahadith that the scholars wrote separate books on it and spoke about some of the narrations specifically. Amongst the books that were written for this purpose are اللآلئ
المصنوعة في الأحاديث الموضوعة. And amongst it as well is الفوائد المجموعة في الأحاديث الموضوعة for الإمام الشوكاني رحمه الله, and the موضوعات for Ibn al-Jawzi. نعم.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum.
Right.
However, Ibn al-Jawzi was very quick in giving the ruling of Mawdu upon the hadith
This is a
to the
benefit.
extent that
This is a benefit. This is a sea of knowledge, barakallah fikum. When you come to uh, 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 every author, you have to understand what he means by so and so. Was he quick to judge so and so? Was he quick to say this is authentic? Was he quick to say this is inauthentic? So here the Imam rahimahullah ta'ala said that Ibn al-Jawzi is quick to, and he's not thorough, he's quick to say that this is mawdu' in the hadith. Naam.
um, hadith to the extent, Ahsanallahu ilaykum, the hadith to the extent that the scholar said that he reported a hadith which was recorded by Muslim and rolled it as Mawdu'.
In the
Such
Sahih.
as such,
Imagine the hadith is in the Sahih. Naam.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. As such, it was said that there is no consequence in Ibn al-Jawzi's ruling of Mawdu', Al-Hakim's ruling of Sahih, and Ibn Mundir's report of Ijma
Okay, so
consensus.
there is no ibra, no taken into consideration. The mawdu' which Ibn al-Jawzi has deemed to be mawdu', meaning that it is light upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or with the authentication of Al-Hakim, because Al-Hakim, you always see that Al-Hakim in his Mustadrak has said so and so, and he died before he completed revising, before he revised his book and so on, and that's why you always see وَتَعَقَّبَهُ الذَّهَبِ, and the Dhahabi after him said so and so. طيب, so and the authentication of Al-Hakim and the ijma' of Ibn al-Mundhir. So if Ibn al-Mundhir says it's ijma', this is not taken into consideration because they are too easy in saying that. Na'am.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. This is because all of them were quick to give these attributes to narrations. In fact, I have deeply analyzed Ibn al-Mundir's work and found issues with what he stated as ijma. However, he says, and we do not know of any difference in opinions. And when he says this, that is limiting his rulings to his own knowledge, he freed himself of responsibility in front of Allah subhanahu wa
Imam
ta'ala.
bin Uthaymeen himself started studying, going through what he says that this is ijma'. However, he says he does not say this is ijma'. He says, I don't know of any disagreement to this or anybody that opposed this. So he's not at fault because this is to the extent of his knowledge. To the extent of his knowledge, he does not know anybody who opposed it. You understand, barakallahu fikum? So his dhimma is innocent. So he's innocent in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he spoke to the extent of his knowledge. Na'am.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. Sheikh, I have a small question in between if you don't mind.
Let's finish first. Na'am.
Okay, barakallahu fikum.
There
I'll
isn't
just,
much
keep it.
left, by the way. Na'am.
Yeah. Inshallah, Sheikh. Barakallahu fikum.
We have a question saying what's
there are-
marfu'? Is marfu', meaning the chain of narration goes all the way to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Na'am.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. There are many reasons for the fabrication of ahadith. Among them is the ta'assub, fanaticism for or against the madhabs.
Not fanaticism, not fanaticism. This is correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's what is meant. At-ta'assub meaning biasness, being biased. Is this fanaticism? Native speakers.
It could be a part of fanaticism. Could be.
Yeah, but that's not what is understood of, right?
Maybe because everyone was like calling to their own madhab and completely abandoning the others.
So biasness. Nah.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. So, or for groups, that is the Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Rafida are the worst of the liars upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because they are unable to support their ideology except through lying. Thus, their school of thought is false, as Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentioned about them. There are also many narrations that dispraise the Bani al-Umayyah, and most of it was fabricated by the Rafida because the Umayyads and Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu an were at war and engulfed in tribulations. And the Mawdu' narration is to be rejected, and the mention of it is prohibited except in the case of mentioning it in order to clarify that it is a fabricated hadith. So it is obligatory
So the
upon
ruling is haram. The ruling, it is haram, prohibited. is sinful. Naam.
Ahsanallahu alaikum. So it is obligatory upon the narrator to explain it to the common people as the fabrication of the hadith upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In is one of the major sins due to the narration. Whosoever intentionally lies upon me shall have his place in the hellfire. Allahu musta'an. And it is confirmed that he said, whomsoever narrates from me a hadith of which he knew was a lie, then he is one of the liars. If you were to mention this type of hadith to the people, then you will have to explain to them that it is mawdu' and a lie attributed to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And it is also a must to report it in the third person, such as using it was said that, it was narrated that, it was mentioned that, and its likes, so as to not attribute it to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in an affirmed manner. The reason is that if you did this, then you may cause a misconception to the audience. Amongst the important matters that we must bring to attention about is Al-Zamakhshari's method in his tafsir book, where he would begin or end the surah that he was commentating upon by reporting hadith regarding the virtues of the surah, which were very, very weak or mawdu'. However, Allah has made this task easy, as Hafiz ibn Hajar made the takhrij, extraction of the chains of narration of the narrations in the tafsir work of Al-Kashaf Al-Kashaf by
Al-Kashaf.
Al-Zamakhshari.
Al-Kashaf Liz-Zamakhshari. And today we were speaking about this. We were speaking about the fact that somebody would read something and it includes both Sahih and Da'if, and he doesn't know. He just reads it and says he accepts all the information in the book as to be true. And the messenger said, then this happened, and that happened, and this happened between the Sahaba, and so on and so forth, not knowing that this book is not a Sahih. Or the author of the book, when he wrote this book, he did not say, I'm only going to write that which is Sahih, and does not have tahqiq or anything. So he just reads it. Allah al-Musta'an. And some of the books are written for the ulama and the mashayikh, the students of knowledge, that can differ between Sahih, authentic and inauthentic. And then comes a person who is ammi, who has no stake in all of these sciences or branches of knowledge, and then comes and wants to become the mufti of the ummah, and speaking about the most dangerous and most crucial aspects of the religion, talks about fitna, talks about shedding blood, and whether this person is a kafir or not a kafir, and so on and so forth, because he has read one book that has sahih and da'if and munkar and so many things in it. And the miskin thinks that khalas, he has read a book, then everything in this book is correct, and now he has become the mufti of all humanity. Wal-'iyadu billah. And this is, by the way, I'm not exaggerating. This happens. People come and start talking, indulging about what happened between the Sahaba themselves, as if he knows more than the Sahaba, and wants to judge this and judge that, and makes rulings in the religion, and then apply them to people and say that they are not on the millah of Islam. And yani, things that you, if you give to the biggest of the ulama, they would think twice before they speak in these manners. Subhanallah. And this person, I read so and so in the book of Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, for example, for Ibn Kathir. Like, do you know what you have read? Is this sahih or not? No, he doesn't know. I think, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, I think he doesn't even know what sahih, hasan and da'if is. Maybe he knows what sahih and da'if is, that's it. But if you put hasan, he will be thrown off guard. He doesn't know what to do. And if you told him sahih li dhati, sahih li ghayri, he doesn't understand what this is. If you tell him mawdu', he doesn't understand what mawdu' is. Mu'dal, he doesn't understand any of that. So he takes all the ahadith, no problem. Allah al-Musta'an, this is not the way. Barakallahu feekum. Na'am.
Ahsanallahu alaykum. So the work Al-Kashaf by Al-Zamakhshari and explained which were the Sahih, the Dhaif, and the Mawdu narrations.
So,
Ibn Hajar.
So be very careful from Al-Kashaf, and we know Zamakhshari and the Aqidah of the Zamakhshari. But know it as just an information. We're not going to read in Al-Kashaf, but we read in the books of the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah. But you know that as Zamakhshari, in the Kashaf was Zamakhshari, there are many inauthentic hadith. Then he said, وَقَدْ أَتَتْ كَالْجَوْهَرِ الْمَكْنُونِ سميتها منظومة البيقوني فوق 30 بأربع أتت أبياتها ثم بخير ختمت. نعم.
أحسن الله إليكم. So Imam al-Bayquni says, indeed, it came like a bidden gem, which I have entitled the poem of al-Bayquni. Al-Imam Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah says, the other statement, it came, the damir refers to this poem, and his statement like a hidden gem means it came like the example of a hidden gem. That thus the preposition kaf is for the sake of the comparison. The verb came is in the past tense with its doer Arabic fa'il hidden, while the phrase like a gem is accusative, as it is situational. It came like the parable of a gem. His statement hidden, that is kept away from the sun, the wind, and the dust. As such, it shall always be shining lustrously. And his statement, the poem of Al-Bayquni, he attributed the poem to himself as he was the one who composed it. Uh, Imam Al-Bayquni, rahimahullah, says, it came with 4 above 30. Its sections concluded and sealed with goodness. The Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, says, the
Before we
author's
finish,
line.
does anyone memorize this this poem? Answer in the chat, the YouTube chat. Of course, this is only for the live. And if we have some of the mashayikh here with us, the brothers in the Zoom, if one of you memorizes, and he knows, he has already memorized the Bayquniyyah, let me know. You can type in, say, I memorized the Bayquniyyah. Let me know if you have already memorized the Bayquniyyah. Type in the chat. نعم. نعم أخي إزهار.
Ahsanallahu ilaykum. So, Imam Ibn Uthaymeen's explanation says, the author's line, it came with 40 above 30. That is, it came in 34 lines, and his saying in its sections concluded and sealed with goodness. That is, the lines of this poem came 4 above 30, and then they were concluded with goodness. This commentary ends here with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a Monday night, the 10th of, I guess this is Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's commentary.
Yeah. At the year 1412. This is 32 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I might have been born or not yet.
SubhanAllah.
سبحان
We
الله.
ask Allah to accept it.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نعم نسأل الله تعالى. So the Shaykh is saying, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أن يتقبل منا صالح الأعمال, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from us the righteous deeds or our righteous deeds, وأن يغفر الزلل والخطأ, and to forgive and pardon mistakes and shortcomings. أو إنه سميع مجيب, for he is all hearing and he answers. والله أعلم, the Shaykh says, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا وإمامنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. الحمد لله الذي بحمده تتم الصالحات. اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا، وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا، وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معادنا، التي فيها معادنا، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذ منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولوالديهم ولذرياتهم ولمشايخنا وعلمائنا وولاة أمرنا وللمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. I said نشهد instead of أشهد, and that's a mistake, so I corrected it. And the Imam Al-Allama Muhammad Aman Al-Jami rahimahullah ta'ala, in his explanation on At-Tadmuriyah, he has mentioned this. He has said that we make dua, we say نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. I can make dua for others. But when it comes to the testimony, I cannot make testimony on behalf of you. I cannot say nashhadu. And if anybody wants to claim that we say nashhadu, then he has to bring evidence. And this is in his explanation on التدمرية. وصلى اللهم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. I will be on Zoom for 5 minutes, inshallah.